16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo Genesis.
Does.
Genesis.
Does.
Genesis.
Does.
Genesis.
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't? Buy.
Hello everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and welcome to my 4-part marathon of reviewing Sega Genesis games. Now, obviously, for this marathon, I'm going to be reviewing 4 Sega Genesis games, but I've set a few rules for it. It has to be a first-party release. So, Earthworm Jim, I'm afraid you're out. But I'll get to Earthworm Jim later this year. Now, a lot of you want me to review the classic Sonic games, and I really want to review them too, but not until later. I mean, the Sega Genesis was more than just a Sonic console. So, this June, I'll do a marathon of the classic Sonic games. Don't worry. I'll even compare and contrast the iOS ports of those games. So sorry folks, I won't be reviewing Sonic 1, 2, 3, or CD this month, but this June. But don't worry, I'll throw in a Sonic game at the end of this month. Not 1, 2, 3, or CD, but there were 3 other Sonic games on that console. So stay tuned, folks. The Sega Genesis hit store shelves in North America in 1989 and was a successor to the Sega Master System. Sega took a huge risk since the Master System, while amazing and had superior hardware to the NES, its library of games was weak and had virtually no third-party support since the NES had all of it. So the Master System that launched in 1986 failed to compete with the NES. However, the appropriately named Sega Genesis had 16-bit graphics compared to the 8-bit NES. This allowed the gamers to have a near-identical arcade experience at the comfort of their own homes, minus the jars of quarters they had to expend. In fact, the Sega Genesis was the, no pun intended, genesis of the 4th generation of gaming, which was notorious for basically putting a lot of arcades out of business. I mean, why would you go to the arcade to play Truxton when you can play an identical version at home? I mean, it would save you quarters and gas money. The Genesis also had a lot of side-scrolling and overhead shooters like Thunder Force, which were worth playing too. Not to mention a lot of them supported multiplayer, so bring your friends over to your house instead of the arcade. Not to mention that Sega Genesis had the heavily advertised blast processing. When the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which was the successor to the NES, was released in 1991, there was fierce competition like no other console generation has seen. I mean, in the commercials, they blatantly insulted the other console. I mean, take a look at this clip.
The Sega Genesis has blast processing. Super Nintendo doesn't. So what's blast processing do? What if you don't have blast processing?
I mean, sure there's competition even to this day, but at least the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are civilized to each other. You never hear them insult the other on TV, maybe in a few social media posts, but now social media focuses more on video game development rumors and disassembling the damsel in distress trope that, after 30 years, all of a sudden became a problem with feminists. But anyways, the Sega Genesis had a vast library of games, Sonic being their primary cash cow like Mario was to Nintendo. Sega's secondary but also main reasons gamers would consider buying a Genesis would include the amazing Golden Axe trilogy, the Streets of Rage games, and also some third-party support from Disney. Now, that was a brief history of the Sega Genesis. Now let's roll the footage and check out Castle of Illusion starring Mickey Mouse. Does it still hold up? Let's find out.
Castle of Illusion was developed and published by Sega and licensed by Disney. Now, I wish I had a more elaborate development history, but judging by the plot of the game and character usage, I theorize that Disney licensed only the likenesses of Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and other Disney characters to Sega, as well as other characters to use in the 3 sequels that came out after Castle of Illusion. Like, Donald Duck, for example, was featured in World of Illusion, the sequel on the Sega Genesis. One thing for sure, Disney did license the series to Sega, and Castle of Illusion was developed by Sega themselves. It's a 2D side-scrolling platformer, kind of like every licensed game at the time.
Seriously, there are more licensed 2D platformer games than there are oil platforms in Alaska.
Well, unlike the majority of licensed games, this game had a lot of heart put into it. Although Castle of Illusion was licensed by Disney, it's not based off anything Disney made, other than that the game stars 2 iconic Disney characters. So basically, the game has the benefit of having enough time to be developed and debugged without being rushed out the door like I said, the majority of licensed games.
So, if you're wondering if Castle of Illusion is nothing more than a licensed piece of sad trash, no it's not. Like DuckTales and Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, it's an actual competent, well put together game.
Now, the story of the game is basically, well, the game begins with Mickey and Minnie dancing happily in a field until an evil witch named Mizrabel, get it? Mizrabel? Miserable? Anyways, kidnaps Minnie and vanishes to the Castle of Illusion. So Mickey, being the brave mouse that he is, sets out into the castle to save Minnie from whatever Mizrabel's diabolical plan is.
Okay then. Well, it's not gonna get an award for best writing in a video game anytime soon, but whatever gets this game started.
I have to say that the graphics of the game look really nice, although Mickey could use a few more frames of animation, but other than that, it's hard not to get sucked into this lively, wacky world in the Castle of Illusion. I mean, the backgrounds look really nice, and so do the enemy sprites. Now, the controls of the game are where it really stands out. Rather than the Mario-like attack where you jump on top of an enemy and flatten it just like that, you have to press C the button in midair or the down button to butt bounce on the enemies. If you think that's uncivilized, don't worry. You can also press A or B to throw apples or other items at enemies, provided you collected them in the levels. These items are everywhere, and you might find yourself collecting 30 of them by the end of the first level. Now, as for the gameplay, like I said, it's a 2D side-scrolling platformer, but the game is relatively short and can be beaten in an hour and a half if you know what you're doing. The levels are also very linear, and there are only like 5 levels each containing, give or take, 3 stages. Then, after you clear the 5 levels, you head into the final level, and that would be where the witch's tower is, and you face Mizrabel there to save your Minnie.
Look, it is not a spoiler if it's the obvious outcome. Oh, maybe Mizrabel butchers Minnie and leaves her lying dead on the stone-tiled floor for Mickey to come across when he finally comes to that tower. How about that for an ending? Oh wait, maybe it does happen.
The game also does a very good job with the music. It's not exactly catchy, but it's pretty fast-paced and upbeat, and for this game, it kind of works. I really like the theme of the second level with the wind-up marching band toys. That's probably my favorite track in the game. But the game also has some other pretty cool soundtracks. Now, for the final question, how well did this game age? Well, for a 2D platformer in the Genesis days, it aged pretty well and still holds up to this day. But for a really short game, I wouldn't recommend paying more than $10 for this download or used. But unlike DuckTales, this game is very linear, and, well, every playthrough will feel the same. So while this is one of the best licensed video games ever made, I would give this game an 81 out of 100. While not masterful, it's definitely good, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't innovate the platformer genre by any means and seems a bit more bare bones compared to the other platformers released during the time. But the graphics and the music complement the gameplay very well, and the controls are very precise. So for that, I give the game a lot of credit. Now, while the game doesn't innovate as much as I would like it to, it's still a great time worthy of multiple playthroughs, even if it is linear. Sometimes we don't have the time to invest in 8 hours in the newest innovative platformer. Sometimes we just want to sit down and play something that's just fun, and that's it. I mean, this game spawned an entire series, and the 3 sequels I'd have to check out. There's 2 on the Game Gear / Master System, and 1 on the Genesis. I really want to play World of Illusion sometime soon since it supports co-op multiplayer, but I'll have to check that one out later since this marathon kind of has a 1 per franchise rule this month. But don't worry, I will check out World of Illusion, and maybe if I have the time, I'll check out the Game Gear games like Land of Illusion and Legend of Illusion. But I wouldn't count on it being really soon, maybe way later this year. I'm sorry, I have a lot on my plate in the following months after this.
Thank you so much for watching this video review of Castle of Illusion for the Sega Genesis. And remember to stay awesome.